The plan was simple. A measured, dignified return to the spotlight. No live crowd, no cheering fans, no hostile protesters. Just a high-profile guest, a comfortable setting, and an experienced journalist armed with research and pointed questions. But within the opening moments, something fractured. Because the interviewer hadn't arrived for pleasant conversation. She came seeking answers about shifting narratives, inconsistent details, and why someone who repeatedly declares his desire for solitude continues gravitating toward the most visible platforms available. When the guest recognized this wouldn't be a sympathetic exchange, when he understood that charm alone wouldn't navigate these waters, his demeanor shifted. His voice gained an edge. His body language became guarded. The atmosphere grew colder than the evening sky visible through the studio windows. By the broadcast's conclusion, the central question wouldn't be about honesty. It would be whether he possessed the resilience to endure being examined the same way anyone else would be. The production design suggested warmth the conversation wouldn't deliver. An elegantly curved seating area surrounded a luminous circular surface that cast soft blues and purples across the polished floor. Two beverages sat untouched, positioned with deliberate symmetry, creating an illusion of harmony designed purely for broadcast. Behind them, floor-to-ceiling windows showcased the metropolitan skyline at night. Distant illumination, architectural silhouettes, the quiet presence of a city observing from the darkness. No studio audience, no supportive laughter to rescue difficult moments, no encouraging applause to rescue uncomfortable silences. Just the seasoned journalist, positioned with perfect posture and organized materials, and across from her the former royal in tailored attire, formal enough to project seriousness, relaxed enough to signal independence from traditional expectations. Her expression conveyed professional courtesy with surgical precision. "Thank you for being here tonight," she began, voice measured and composed. He acknowledged with a single nod. "Happy to be here." The camera maintained a balanced, wide frame. Both figures held equal visual weight. That choice alone felt significant. This program didn't angle its perspective towards sympathy, it distributed power evenly. She consulted her notes briefly, then returned her attention to him. "You've discussed extensively your decision to step back, to reclaim autonomy over your existence. Tonight, I'd like to examine specifics, not headlines, not catchphrases, actual details." His expression tightened almost imperceptibly, as though detecting an unwelcome direction. "Certainly," he replied. "Details work for me." Her smile appeared and vanished, professionally courteous, nothing warmer. "Excellent. Let's begin with something straightforward. You've repeatedly emphasized wanting a private existence. Yet, since your departure, you've participated in major broadcast interviews, produced an extensive documentary project, published a best-selling autobiography, and accepted numerous speaking opportunities. Some observers suggest this resembles brand building more than privacy-seeking." His jaw muscles tensed visibly. "That's quite a slanted characterization," he responded. She maintained unwavering eye contact. "Is it inaccurate?" A pause followed, brief but weighted. He shifted backwards slightly. "It represents a fundamental misunderstanding. People reduce everything to commercial terms because that's their mental framework. I'm sharing my lived experience." She nodded, as though this response was anticipated. "Then let me reframe the inquiry. What does privacy actually mean for you at this point? Because it evidently doesn't translate to silence." A short, mirthless laugh escaped him. "Privacy means freedom from harassment. It means my loved ones not being pursued. It means not being—" "Scrutinized?" she offered. "No," he corrected, sharper than intended. "Hunted." The words suspended in the air. The studio seemed to hold its breath. Even the ambient lighting appeared to intensify. Her tone remained level. "Understood. You use the word hunted, yet you also made a deliberate choice to appear on national television tonight. That represents a decision. His eyes flashed with irritation. So speaking publicly means I deserve harassment. Is that your implication? She kept her hands still, completely composed. No, I'm asking you to reconcile two realities. You seek safety and privacy while repeatedly selecting public platforms. Viewers are attempting to understand where boundaries exist. He inhaled deliberately through his nose. His posture grew noticeably stiffer, more guarded. The boundary, he said slowly, is consent. I choose when to speak. I don't choose when people invade my life. Her acknowledgement was minimal. Consent matters, so let's examine another concept you frequently reference, security. His expression tightened further, as though she'd located a sensitive point. She continued evenly. In various interviews, you've indicated that protection was withdrawn in ways that left you vulnerable. Many watching, particularly here, ask a direct question. If you're residing privately overseas, why should citizens here bear concern? His mouth twitched, half disbelief, half frustration. Because my identity didn't change when I changed locations. My risk profile didn't vanish because I crossed an ocean. She acknowledged once, then pressed. Do you acknowledge that your public choices amplify that risk? Your appearances, your content, your commercial arrangements? Do you accept that these decisions influence the security discussion? He stared at her, and the first genuine crack in his composed demeanor became visible. That's genuinely absurd, he said, voice low and cutting. So what's the alternative? I should vanish? I should remain silent and hide from the world? She didn't match his escalating tone. No, I'm asking you to reconcile two realities. You seek safety and privacy while repeatedly selecting public platforms. Viewers are attempting to understand where boundaries exist. He inhaled deliberately through his nose. His posture grew noticeably stiffer, more guarded. The boundary, he said slowly, is consent. I choose when to speak. I don't choose when people invade my life. Her acknowledgement was minimal. Consent matters, so let's examine another concept you frequently reference, security. His expression tightened further, as though she'd located a sensitive point. She continued evenly. In various interviews, you've indicated that protection was withdrawn in ways that left you vulnerable. Many watching, particularly here, ask a direct question. If you're residing privately overseas, why should citizens here bear concern? His mouth twitched, half disbelief, half frustration. Because my identity didn't change when I changed locations. My risk profile didn't vanish because I crossed an ocean. She acknowledged once, then pressed. Do you acknowledge that your public choices amplify that risk? Your appearances, your content, your commercial arrangements? Do you accept that these decisions influence the security discussion? He stared at her, and the first genuine crack in his composed demeanor became visible. That's genuinely absurd, he said, voice low and cutting. So what's the alternative? I should vanish? I should remain silent and hide from the world? She didn't match his escalating tone. No, I'm asking you to reconcile two realities. You seek safety and privacy while repeatedly selecting public platforms. Viewers are attempting to understand where boundaries exist. He inhaled deliberately through his nose. His posture grew noticeably stiffer, more guarded. The boundary, he said slowly, is consent. I choose when to speak. I don't choose when people invade my life. Her acknowledgement was minimal. Consent matters, so let's examine another concept you frequently reference, security. His expression tightened further, as though she'd located a sensitive point. She continued evenly. In various interviews, you've indicated that protection was withdrawn in ways that left you vulnerable. Many watching, particularly here, ask a direct question. If you're residing privately overseas, why should citizens here bear concern? His mouth twitched, half disbelief, half frustration. Because my identity didn't change when I changed locations. My risk profile didn't vanish because I crossed an ocean. She acknowledged once, then pressed. Do you acknowledge that your public choices amplify that risk? Your appearances, your content, your commercial arrangements? Do you accept that these decisions influence the security discussion? He stared at her, and the first genuine crack in his composed demeanor became visible. That's genuinely absurd, he said, voice low and cutting. So what's the alternative? I should vanish? I should remain silent and hide from the world? She didn't match his escalating tone. No, I'm asking you to reconcile two realities. You seek safety and privacy while repeatedly selecting public platforms. Viewers are attempting to understand where boundaries exist. He inhaled deliberately through his nose, his choices instead of substance. Her voice remained measured. Word choices become substance when they affect trust. He shook his head slowly. This is exhausting. She didn't flinch. I imagine it is, but it's also what accountability feels like. The tension thickened noticeably. He crossed one leg over the other, a defensive posture replacing earlier openness. Let's discuss family, she said, turning another page. Specifically, your sibling. His eyes hardened instantly. She noticed, but continued anyway. You've expressed desire for reconciliation. Simultaneously, you've described deeply personal conflicts in extensive detail. Can you explain how public disclosure assists private healing? His voice dropped, colder now. I didn't initiate this. She met his gaze. But you continued it. His jaw clenched. Because silence protects those with power. She nodded once, and speaking publicly can harm people who didn't consent to their story being told. His eyes flashed. You're referring to my brother. I'm referring to anyone, she replied. But yes, your sibling is part of this. He leaned forward again, visible frustration evident. So what should I have done? Suppress everything? Pretend nothing happened? She didn't raise her voice. You could have established boundaries. He scoffed. Easy to suggest when you're not living it. She replied quietly. True, but I am living within journalism, and I understand that once something becomes public, it never returns to private. He stared at her, breathing heavier now. You're framing this as though I enjoyed it, he said, as though I woke up one morning thinking, let's destroy everything. Her tone softened slightly, but only slightly. I don't believe you enjoyed it. I believe you thought it was necessary. The question is whether it still is. He didn't answer immediately. When he did, his voice carried a sharp edge. You don't get to determine when my story concludes. She nodded. No, but viewers get to determine when they stop listening. That landed harder than any accusation. His lips pressed together. So this is about ratings. No, she said firmly. It's about fatigue. He blinked. Fatigue? Yes, she continued. People are weary, not of you personally, but of the same unresolved narrative. They seek clarity, not repetition. He shook his head, disbelief evident across his features. You're asking me to package my life more neatly? I'm asking you to reconcile it, because currently the pieces don't align. His patience fractured, slightly, but perceptibly. You know what doesn't align? He said sharply. The fact that I'm criticized for speaking, criticized for silence, criticized for leaving, criticized for maintaining connections. There's no version of me that's acceptable. She looked at him steadily. That may be accurate, but there is a version that's coherent. The silence following that statement was heavy. He leaned back, visibly restraining himself. You keep approaching this like it's a logical puzzle, he said. It's not. It's human. Her reply was calm but unyielding. And humans contradict themselves, but public figures are judged on how they manage those contradictions. He laughed again, sharper this time. So now I'm a public figure again. I thought I resigned from that position. Her eyes locked onto his. You resigned from the role. You didn't resign from the influence. That achieved its effect. His expression darkened. You're enjoying this, he said flatly. She didn't react emotionally. I'm performing my function. He shook his head. Your function appears to be cornering me. No, she said. My function is asking what people watching are already asking. He leaned forward, voice tense. And if I reject your premise? She answered without hesitation. Then the conversation becomes more difficult. Another pause. Another heavy silence. He looked down briefly, then back up, his tone now edged with anger rather than frustration. Let me ask you something, he said. Do you think I regret leaving? She didn't rush her response. I think you regret how complicated it became. His lips tightened. That's not identical. No, she agreed. It's more difficult. He stared at her, incredulous. More difficult? Yes, she continued, because regret about chaos doesn't include a clear resolution. It persists. His hands clenched subtly on his knee. You're psychoanalyzing me. She replied softly, You invited the world into your psychology. That observation hung in the air like fracturing ice. His voice dropped, cold and controlled. Then let me be explicit. I don't owe anyone a tidy conclusion. She nodded. And no one owes you unquestioning acceptance. The tension was now unmistakable. The calm facade had dissolved. She glanced at her notes one final time before looking up. When we return, I want to discuss responsibility, specifically the distinction between explanation and blame. He didn't respond immediately. When he did, his voice was tight. You really don't relent, do you? She met his gaze. Not when the story still contains gaps. He leaned back, eyes hard, jaw set. Then let's address them. But the manner in which he spoke made one thing evident. This was no longer a conversation, it was a confrontation. The studio lighting remained unchanged after the break. No dramatic reset, no softening of atmosphere, just the same ambient glow, the same circular table, and attention now so concentrated it felt physical. The guest sat rigid, arms crossed, hands clasped tighter than before. Across from him, the journalist didn't shuffle her materials this time. She looked directly at him. We've discussed consistency. We've discussed credibility. Now I want to discuss responsibility. He exhaled through his nose. Continue. You frequently stated the media shaped your narrative unfairly, that you transformed your pain into spectacle. But you've also chosen to speak through documentaries, interviews, books, platforms with enormous reach. His jaw tightened. Because silence didn't protect me. She nodded. Understood. But here's what people struggle with. At what point does explaining your experience become assigning blame? He leaned forward. I never blamed anyone for my emotions. She didn't blink. You blamed institutions. You blamed the press. You blamed the system. His voice sharpened. Because they deserve blame. She raised her hand, not to interrupt, but to slow the pace. Let's be precise, she said. When you discuss mental health, trauma, generational patterns, those are powerful conversations. But when you frame them around specific individuals who don't respond publicly, it creates a one-sided narrative. He shook his head. They could respond. She replied calmly, but they choose not to, and that restraint changes how the story is received. He scoffed. So silence is noble now? Sometimes. It's dignified. His eyes flashed. Easy to claim when you're the one being misrepresented. She leaned slightly forward. But that's precisely my point. You've said you were misrepresented, yet you're the one shaping how others are perceived. He stared at her.
Are you comparing me to tabloid journalism? Her voice remained steady. I'm asking whether you've considered how similar the impact can feel. That was the moment the atmosphere transformed. He sat back abruptly. That's unfair. She didn't retreat. Is it? His voice rose slightly. I told my truth. And truth is not the same as completeness. He laughed sharply. Now you're policing truth? No, I'm examining consequence. His frustration was now no subtlety. You speak as though I calculated every word, he said, as though this was some strategic operation. She answered softly, I think you underestimated how permanent words become when you carry that level of visibility. He froze at the observation. Don't frame it that way. She paused. It's how the world perceives you. He leaned forward again, anger now unmistakable. That's exactly the problem. I walked away from that identity. And yet, it still enters the room before you do. He clenched his jaw. So what do you want from me? She didn't hesitate. Clarity. He laughed, incredulous. Clarity? Yes, she continued, because currently your message oscillates between I want peace and here's everything that hurt me. People are struggling to understand which future you're inviting them into. He shook his head. You're requesting a clean narrative where none exists. I'm requesting ownership, she replied. I owned my pain. But did you own your power? Silence. He blinked. What power? The power to shape perception, to reopen wounds for others, to keep stories alive that might never close. He sat still.
His voice was sharp. Because the patterns are identical. Her reply was firm, but the outcomes are not. He stared at her. What does that mean? It means, she said carefully, that your mother had far fewer resources, far less control, and no platform of her own. You do. His breathing grew heavier. So now you're telling me my pain is less legitimate? He snapped. No, she replied. I'm saying your responsibility is greater. That achieved its effect. He leaned back, shaking his head. You've crossed a boundary. She met his gaze. I think we just reached it. His tone turned icy. You're weaponizing my mother. She replied calmly, I'm refusing to allow her to be used as a shield. The atmosphere felt frozen. He stood up halfway, then stopped himself, sitting back down, visibly struggling to maintain composure. You have no idea what it's like, he said through clenched teeth. Her voice softened, but her words did not. And you have no idea what it's like for people listening, trying to reconcile sympathy with exhaustion. He stared at the table, then back at her. So what is this really about? Do you want me to apologize for speaking? She shook her head. I want you to acknowledge that speaking doesn't absolve you of consequence. He laughed bitterly. So I lose either way. She nodded once. That's often the price of public life. He leaned back, arms crossed now, a clear signal that openness was gone. You know what? He said coldly. This doesn't feel like journalism anymore. She responded evenly. It feels uncomfortable because it's honest. He looked at her, eyes sharp. Then let me be honest, he said. I don't trust this process. She didn't flinch. Then why are you still here? He paused. For a moment it appeared he might stand and walk away immediately. Instead he said quietly, because I thought this would be fair. She replied, fair doesn't mean gentle. The silence that followed was heavy, charged, conclusive. She glanced toward the camera briefly before turning back to him. When we return, she said. "I want to ask you one final question about whether you still believe this path leads to peace." He didn't answer. His expression communicated everything. This wasn't heading toward resolution, it was heading toward rupture. The studio felt smaller after the break, not physically, but emotionally, as if the walls had leaned inward, listening. The guest sat rigid, arms crossed, gaze fixed somewhere beyond the interviewer. The openness from earlier portions of the conversation had vanished. In its place stood something harder, defensive, final. She glanced at her notes once, then set them aside. "I mentioned before the break that I had one final question," she began. Her voice was calm, measured, unmistakably serious. He didn't respond. She continued anyway. "You've described this journey, your interviews, your book, your public statements, as a path toward peace, toward healing. So here is the question I promised." She paused. "Do you genuinely believe this path is bringing you closer to peace, or is it keeping you permanently at war?" The question landed without force, without drama, and somehow that made it devastating. He looked up slowly. "That's a loaded question." She nodded once. "It's an honest one." He shook his head. "You keep framing this as if I thrive on conflict." She replied softly, "I'm asking whether conflict has become familiar." His jaw tightened. "You're psychoanalyzing me again?" "No," she said, "I'm listening to what your actions suggest." He leaned forward, voice sharp. "You don't get to define my healing." She didn't argue. "No, but I do get to ask whether it's working." He let out a short, mirthless laugh. "You think healing looks neat? You think it wraps itself in a bow?" She answered calmly, "I think healing doesn't require a perpetual audience." That sentence changed everything. His eyes hardened. "So I should disappear?" "No," she said, "but perhaps speak without burning bridges behind you." He scoffed. "That's remarkable coming from this program." She met his gaze. "This isn't about institutions anymore." His voice rose. "Of course it is. That's what this always becomes. You pretend neutrality, but the undertone is judgment." She responded evenly. "Neutrality doesn't mean silence in the face of contradiction." He stood up halfway from his seat. "You've made your point," he said coldly. She looked up at him. "Have I?" He straightened fully now. "I came here expecting fairness. Instead, I'm being dissected like a case study." She remained seated, composed. "You're being questioned because you're influential." He snapped back. "I rejected that influence." "And yet," she said quietly, "it still follows you." He shook his head. "This is exactly why people don't trust media." She replied, "And this is exactly why people struggle to trust your narrative." The room froze. He stared at her. "Repeat that." She didn't flinch. "People are listening, and many feel torn between empathy and fatigue." He laughed bitterly. "So now I'm exhausting." She chose her words carefully. "Not exhausting, unresolved." He clenched his fists. "You're treating vulnerability as a flaw." "No," she said, "I'm asking whether vulnerability becomes performative when it never progresses forward." He stepped back, breathing heavier now. "I won't remain here and be lectured." She nodded slowly. "Then perhaps this conversation has reached its limit." His voice was sharp. "You're ending it?" She looked him straight in the eye. "I think you already have." For a moment, neither spoke. Then he reached down, picked up his jacket, and turned slightly away from the set. "This was a mistake," he said flatly. She stood, not in confrontation, but in closure.
Using his name deliberately, she said, "I invited you here to speak. You did, but dialogue requires remaining when the questions become uncomfortable." He turned back. "This wasn't dialogue, it was an ambush." She replied calmly, "It was accountability." He shook his head. "I won't be part of this." He took a step toward the edge of the set. She didn't raise her voice, she didn't follow him. She simply said, "Then we'll conclude here." He paused for half a second, just long enough for the cameras to capture the conflict on his face. Then he walked off. No dramatic exit, no slamming doors, just the sound of footsteps fading behind the studio lights. The cameras remained on the interviewer. She inhaled once, slowly. Then she turned to the lens. "This has been our program. Conversations aren't always comfortable, but they matter." A brief pause. "Good night." The lights dimmed, and the silence that followed felt louder than any argument. If this story made you think, question, or feel the tension, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel for more in-depth discussions about public figures, media accountability, and the conversations that shape our understanding of truth. Hit that notification bell so you never miss our next upload. Which perspective resonated with you? Was the questioning fair or too aggressive? Tell us in the comments below. We read every single one. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.